Hello, and welcome to Hawk Mountain Sanctuary's Home Discovery Series. Today's program is Pennsylvania Black Bears with Dan Lynch, Wildlife Education Specialist and Deputy Game Warden of the Pennsylvania Game Commission.
Hi, Jamie.
Hi, Dan. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Happy to be here.
My name is Jamie Dawson. I'm the Director of Education at Hawk Mountain Sanctuary, and we are so glad that you are all joining us today. Hawk Mountain is the world's very first refuge for birds of prey, and we continue to work hard to be leaders in raptor conservation, science, and education, locally and globally around the world. Hawk Mountain is a private nonprofit, and membership is the lifeblood of our organization. To all of our members, much gratitude for your continued support. And if you're joining us today and you're not a member, we hope that you consider becoming one in the future. Hawk Mountain hopes that everyone remains safe and healthy during these times of COVID challenges, and we are thrilled to offer our local and global community a variety of free virtual programming. As always, Hawk Mountain greatly appreciates and depends on donations. Just so everyone is aware, today's program is being recorded. The video will then be accessible on Hawk Mountain's YouTube channel as a continued resource. We also have a link on our website directly connecting you to our YouTube channel. At any point during today's program, viewers may submit questions through the Q&A feature on the Zoom platform. We've designated time at the end of the program to take some questions from the audience. And we are so excited that Dan Lynch is joining us today to share with us his experience and expertise of working with Pennsylvania black bears. And before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to share some of Dan's backgrounds with our audience. Dan Lynch is a wildlife education specialist and deputy game warden for the Pennsylvania Game Commission in the Southeast region. He has been involved in wildlife education for over 25 years and teaches a variety of classes, including wildlife sign and tracking, bird and mammal identification, wildlife forensics, hunter and trapper education, and many others. Dan has been involved in all aspects of the Game Commission. In addition to the education aspects, he has experience with bear processing, dove and waterfowl trapping and banding, nuisance wildlife management, turkey trapping, and working with numerous other wildlife species. Dan is an avid outdoorsman and is actively involved in hunting, fishing, trapping, camping, and hiking. And I'd also like to add that Dan is a wonderful supporter of Hawk Mountain Sanctuary and has done many, many programs with Hawk Mountain over the years, including his very popular teacher and educator workshops, including Wild About Bears, which is amazing, as well as also facilitating education programs for our summer camp and things like that. So thank you, Dan, for all of your support over the years with Hawk Mountain.
No problem.
Greatly appreciated. So you do so many cool things with your job with the Game Commission. Would you mind sharing with us what is one of the most rewarding aspects of your work?
You know, so I've been trying to think about that. What could I say is be the most rewarding? But it sounds a little corny, but I think some of the times just being able to be involved with teaching, whether it's kids or adults, about wildlife, and then having some sort of experience that happens that you didn't plan on and makes you look really good. And one of those examples would be last year up at Hawk Mountain, we were doing, I think we either did the songbird workshop or something to do with birds, and we were outside and we were using the identifier to call birds, and literally 4 different bird species came in within 3 or 4 feet of everybody, and everybody think I planned it, and of course I said, well, of course I did. But those kinds of things are kind of cool, and sometimes that just happens with wildlife. A real interesting example was years ago, we were doing an outdoor program, I think it was in Elizabethtown, and I had maybe 40 or 50 kids out sitting on the grass, and we were talking about food chains. And we were talking about food chains, and all the kids stopped looking at me, and they were looking up, and here was an osprey flying over, and the osprey had a koi in its talons, like a giant yellow and orange koi fish. As it was flying by, a bald eagle came down out of nowhere, and the osprey drops the koi, turns over, they lock talons. This is all within 100 yards of everybody. They unlock, the eagle lands in front of everybody, grabs the koi and flies away. So everybody's like, did you have anything to do with that? And I'm like, no. And across the street from the school, this girl's like, my dad has giant koi in a pond over there, has 5 of them. And just like clockwork, some kid says, no, he only has 4 of them now. So those kinds of things work out. And I think those are kind of cool, memorable experiences that have happened in my job. So yeah, those are 2.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. That was
Sure.
amazing. Since we're talking about bears, I'm just wondering, any a most memorable experience working with bears in your career in the field?
Well, yeah, actually, and this one had nothing to do with Pennsylvania. Happened to be in New Jersey. I have some friends who work for New Jersey Fish and Game, and I got a call one time in the wintertime, and they said, hey, one of our bear biologists has using telemetry, found a sow in this, it's in a fenced in area where people would store things, like a storage unit facility, and they're going to process it. Would you like to come over? It wasn't that far into New Jersey from where I live in southeastern PA. So we went over, and there was about 30 people there. And the funny part was, this bear was inside this fenced in thing, and the manager of the property lived inside the fenced in area. He had 3 dogs. And this bear decided to set up and have her young within 30 yards of the guy's house. The bear never bothered the dogs. The dogs never bothered the bear. The guy had no idea the bear was there until the biologist showed up with the telemetry. And so they tranquilized the bear, and everybody got to hold the 3 cubs, and we processed everybody and stuck them back with the mom. And those are kind of cool things that I experienced. That wasn't in Pennsylvania, but it could have been a Pennsylvania bear. They'd cross the river all the time.
That's absolutely amazing. It's certainly not many people get to say that is something that they get to do in their.
Yeah, it was cool.
That's definitely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And
sure.
We had an amazing turnout for today's program, Dan. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay.
To learn more about Pennsylvania black bears.
All right. Sounds good. So I will try and share this real quick. All right. Can you see that, Jamie? Hopefully you can.
Yep, it looks great.
Okay, good. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about Pennsylvania black bears. I'm going to talk a little bit about bear biology, some characteristics, some adaptations that bears do, and then we're going to go into the second part of the program will be bear processing. We'll talk a little bit about how we process bears in Pennsylvania, and exactly what that means. And then I'll stop sharing the screen, and I've got a bear pelt, a skull, and some other things that we can talk about. And hopefully people will have some questions. And I think, Jamie, we talked about maybe we'll kind of hold it off until the end unless you see something that I said that's getting a lot of specific questions, and feel free to jump in there. So in Pennsylvania, we have both a biological carrying capacity of bears and a cultural carrying capacity of bears. The biological carrying capacity is most likely one that we'll never reach, meaning there's a food source out there, a food base out there that could support a lot more bears than we probably have now. And of course, we have an estimate. We don't count every single bear, but we probably have a biological carrying capacity of somewhere around 20,000 bears. But in Pennsylvania, when we get to that point of 20,000 bears, we start having a people problem, a human conflict with bears. So we like to get that population down, probably closer to 15 to 16,000 bears. We know that at approximately that estimate of their population, we have the least number of human-bear conflicts. Bears are very adaptable to living in and around people. And so one of the things we use is the ability to hunt bears. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But we hunt bears to try and control some of their numbers. We extend our hunting seasons in certain areas where we have a higher incident of human-bear conflicts. And we try to educate people, which is the most important part of bear management, is educating the public about bears to know how to live with them. So I'm going to talk about that. And so we'll jump around here. I'm not going to read like a script for every slide, but we'll just talk a little bit about bears. So we have black bears in Pennsylvania. They do, as you can see in the slide, come in different color variations. The brown ones at the bottom, many times they're called cinnamon bear, especially have kind of a reddish, but they're not like, it's not super pink, but reddish nose, reddish features around the eyes and things like that. But for the most part, we only have black bears in Pennsylvania, but sometimes they will come in a reddish or brown phase. We have some really large bears in Pennsylvania. So we have normally boars, or the males, will get the biggest. And we have boars in Pennsylvania that all top 800 pounds, which is huge. And what's amazing is, even though you've got this huge, what we call apex predator, but really nothing preys on a bear except, humans during hunting season, and maybe a bear preying on another bear, yet they are super secretive. And sometimes they live in and around your neighborhood or your development, and except for the sign that they leave behind, many people never see them. They're super quiet. A 500-600 pound bear can walk through the woods, and you can be 20-30 yards away, and if you don't see them, you'll never hear them. They're super quiet. Kind of a really interesting critter. They obviously do climb trees. Bears are super fast. Bears can run at a top speed of about 30 miles an hour, which is very fast. Nobody is going to be able to outrun a bear. If a bear decides he's going to chase you and he doesn't catch you, it's most likely because he decided not to. Fortunately, in Pennsylvania, our bears have a pretty good attitude for the most part. We don't have people being eaten by bears in Pennsylvania, wild bears. It's slightly different if you happen to have a menagerie or something and you're inside a cage of a bear. We've had definite problems with that type of situation because that bear, even though it's in a cage, can still be a wild animal. But in Pennsylvania, we don't have people being eaten by bears. And it's kind of amazing. It's such a large critter. And we have about 12.7 million people in the state and 20,000 bears. You'd think that could be a possibility. And we're really happy that it's not. And the more we educate people about bears, the less chance that would happen anyhow. This kind of picture kind of looks like, it might be in a state of hibernation. And our bears do hibernate in Pennsylvania, but it's not the similar, like a true hibernator, like a groundhog or a bat or a chipmunk. This bear can wake up at any time, can come outside of the den or wherever it happens to be. Sometimes they're just under a large tree limb and they just make a nest of leaves, and they don't go in like a typical cave that people think they might go in. And they might wake up, they might go out, they might defecate and come back in and start sleeping again. But they can wake up, their heart rate and breathing does slow down, but not necessarily like a true hibernator like those other species that I talked about. So lots of times, there are obviously a lot of people in Pennsylvania, a lot of bears, but not everybody has seen a bear. But many times the first bear that you see, you think is gigantic. So because you just saw a bear. So people will call us and they'll be like, oh my God, we saw this bear and we have kids around and we need you to do something about it. Well, our dispatchers may ask them, describe a little bit, where was it? Did it do anything wrong? And they might say, well, it was probably like a 500 pound bear. And there's no real way you can tell it's a 500 pound bear just by looking at it. But one of the ways that you can tell whether or not the bear is big or not, and I'll give you a couple of hints here, is you want to look and see how much space is between the belly and the ground. If there's a lot of space, if there's 10, 12 inches or more, plus the bear is got what looks like a small head and big ears, there's a really good chance that's a much smaller bear than you think it is. Because a really big bear, its belly almost touches the ground, and their ears look disproportionately small for their head. So they kind of like, that head gets really, really big, and the ears kind of look much smaller than it would really go for that head. So if you see a bear that looks like his head goes right into his shoulders, not much of a neck at all, his belly's almost dragging on the ground, that's probably a really big bear. But if you see one that looks long and lean, lots of space between the belly and the ground, he's probably not near as big as you think he is. And many times those are the bears that kind of get in trouble with people. And I'll explain why. So a sow, which is the female, she will keep her young, whoops, jumped ahead a little bit. A female, she'll keep her young with her for about 2 years. And in that time, as long as she has those cubs with her, she will not come back into heat. But if a big boar, which is the male, can find that sow and possibly kill those cubs, she will come back into heat again, and he would breed her again. So she is very protective of those young for those 2 years, and they learn a lot from her in those 2 years. And then one day, after about 2 years, she decides, that's it, you guys are gone. And now they've been with her every single day. And then one day she just turns on them. And they end up getting split up, and they end up getting into trouble, meaning if mom was hanging out in bird feeders, they've already learned to do that, and they will show up at people's bird feeders as well. Each time they move into another territory, there might be a bigger bear that's already established that territory, and so they get pushed out of that territory. And we probably have way more bears above Route 80 than we have below Route 80 in Pennsylvania, but we have a lot more people below Route 80. So when the bear is looking for a territory where there's not already a bear, they many times end up coming south. And when they come up south, they run into a lot of people, and that's where we get the human-bear conflicts. So I'm mentioning before, I was talking a little bit about sign. So this is scat or doo-doo. And you can tell, you know, the kinds of things that bears were eating. There's a really good chance these are cherries that the bear was eating, and that you can kind of see all the seeds in there. You'll see grass. So a bear is an omnivore, which means if he went to McDonald's, he would definitely get a Big Mac because it's got all the different food groups in that Big Mac that he would like. So he eats both meat and plants. Even though he's a large animal, probably spend about 70 to 80% of their diet is plant-based, which makes sense because it's a lot easier to sneak up on plants than it is animals. And when you think about it, many times a bear does not have to kill its own food to eat a lot of meat. There's a lot of roadkill out there. You drive down the roads just about anywhere in Pennsylvania, you see roadkill deer all over the place. So a bear could be eating deer all year round and never actually have to kill one. Now, couldn't they kill one? For sure. And when a fawn is super, super young, under 4 or 5 days old, they do what's called a hider strategy, which means they're not going to move. And because they can't really outrun anything. And if a bear happens to come upon one, no doubt they would probably eat that fawn. This picture is kind of showing an opening which happens to be a den, and all this really is a tree that's been blown down, and the bear kind of excavated the dirt underneath there. People sometimes think of it as like this big rock cave and it goes way back in, but that's not really true at all. Normally they're tiny little holes, and it makes sense. You don't want the hole much bigger than your own body because the bear, its body heat is what's keeping everything inside warm. So if it was a really, really big den or big opening, it would be harder to keep it warm inside. So this is an example of one. Most of the bear dens that we find are probably by sows or females that have been collared. In this picture, you can see, excuse me, one of a bear that's been sedated and pulled out of a bear den. Still alive, still awake. You can see its eyes are open here. So what happens is when you sedate a bear, let's say it's inside a den, and a biologist would actually have to crawl down in that den, by the way, or get part of his or her body down in that den to dart the bear. It's a muscle relaxant. So it doesn't put them to sleep. It relaxes all of their muscles. And I'll talk a little bit more about bear processing later on. So in January, that sow, that female, is going to have cubs. And so an average weight for an adult sow in Pennsylvania might be about 175 pounds. They don't get near as big as the boars, but the sow will have, on average, 3 cubs. It's actually more common to have 5 cubs in Pennsylvania than 1. And that is many times focused or based on food source. So if you have a really good food source and it's available, the odds of being able to take care of a larger litter is good. So to give you an example, in Alaska, they probably have more black bears, but the black bear sow averages 1 cub instead of 3, like here in Pennsylvania. The food base, it's a little more iffy as to whether or not you're going to find enough food in Alaska compared to a state like Pennsylvania. So when this cub is born, and this is definitely several weeks old here, but when the cub was born, it's about 6 ounces. And so you got a 175-pound adult or 200-pound adult, and she's having 3 6-ounce little cubs. They're pretty much helpless when they're born, so she takes care of them from that time until 2 years. It's quite a job. They learn to climb really quick. So in addition to the young bear that gets kicked out after 2 years from its mom, they can be a dangerous bear. They're kind of like a teenager. They don't have a whole lot of fear of people. This is also a time of the year when a sow has young cubs like this, that if you see one in the wild or in your neighborhood or whatever, it's cool to take pictures, but you do not want to approach them. Because even though we humans think we are very protective parents, we're not normally 175 pounds that can run 30 miles an hour with giant teeth and claws and can climb a tree in seconds. So she will protect them. If these little guys make some sort of, squeaking noise, whining noise that they're scared, mom's coming or running. And you don't want to try to run away from a predator like that. A suggestion would be, if you would happen to get yourself in that situation, is you want to act bigger than you are. So you want to jump up and down. You want to talk very, very loud to that bear. If you're trying to make sure that you are trying to show that you are not scared. I'm not saying go after the bear, but I'm certainly not saying try to run away, because that's the predator instinct to chase you back down again. So best thing to do if you're around a sow with cubs is to talk out loud so that the sow knows that you're there right away, and to slowly just move away. Take some pictures, that's fine. Certainly don't feed them. We're going to talk about feeding in a little bit too. But you have to be bear aware. You have to be aware of what's going on. And again, this is, a pretty common sight. Not just in the wild out here, in the middle of the woods, but in neighborhoods all over the place. Just an example of what you would see most likely on a large boar bear is this one to the right, looking back. He's got a really, really big head. He's got a super thick neck. And to me, his ears look kind of small for his head. And so that's a pretty good example. Obviously, I can't see everything on him there to tell for sure, but I'm going to assume that that is a boar right there. So we have problems with bears and crops, and problems with bears and beehives. Bears love not just the honey. This is not Pooh Bear. This is not some Walt Disney thing or whatever. This is the bear that's, yes, it's going to eat the honey, but it's also going to eat a lot of the larvae. The larvae are very high in protein. And yes, the bear's going to get stung. Bear has super thick hide. It obviously doesn't bother them because they'll keep coming back to this thing. Now, the odd thing in this picture is that it is surrounded by electric fence, but it's not always turned on. One of the things we tell people, if you're going to put fencing around your beehives, is to wrap uncooked bacon right on the wire, because you want that bear, if it comes to investigate this, to take a lick or touch it with its wet nose onto that wire. It's going to get itself a pretty good shock and then hopefully not want to do it again. But if the bear goes through the fence and the wire only touches its hide and its thick fur, there's a good chance it's not going to get an electrical shock at all. So hunters in Pennsylvania harvest somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 bears a year. We have a bear season now that in most places is a minimum of 4 days. Sometimes, depending on where you are, it might go to a total of 2 weeks or so, or maybe even more, with archery season actually is much longer in, let's say, the southeastern part of Pennsylvania. Every successful bear hunter has to not only purchase a hunting license, but also purchase a bear tag. And then they have to put a field tag in the bear's ear after it's harvested in the field before it's moved out of the field. And they also have to bring that bear to a Game Commission check station where we are going to weigh the bear. You can see he's on a scale here in this picture. We're also going to pull a tooth. That's what one of our PGC folks there is doing. Is they've got a knife. They're kind of they've got a little tool that pulls one of the small teeth out, and I'll show that later on when I show the skull. And we use that to age the bear. And then we put another tag that says it has been lawfully checked at a check station in the bear's ear, and then the successful hunter can either take it to a butcher shop, take it to a taxidermist, and that's the things that they must do to report the bear. So I'm going to move right into some bear processing now. I think I am. Yep, there we go. So this is one of the types of traps that we use to trap bears. This is called a culvert trap. And it's simply called a culvert trap because the main part of the trap is made from a section of culvert pipe that normally goes underneath the roads. PennDOT might use them for water to go through. So we'll take like a 10-foot section of that, weld it onto a trailer so that it can be mobile. And then it has a swinging door on the back. You're looking at where the tail lights are. That's the back of it. That's the door that is open. And it's there's got a little trigger, a little catch. And inside the bear trap, there is a tiny little treadle, no different than if you were to ever see a have-a-heart trap, a box trap, like for a groundhog or a rabbit. Exact same premise here. So basically what we do is we go to a local donut shop or a grocery store and ask if we can get, day-old donuts. I always ask them for, maybe a dozen fresh ones because, bears and maybe game wardens like fresh donuts. But anyhow, we try to get the donuts and any kind of pastries. We'll put a pile of them behind the trap in a pile, and then we'll run the juiciest ones, jelly-filled and all that kind of good stuff, up into the trap and put the best-looking ones inside a little tiny basket that's just in front of a treadle. So the bear comes, it eats a bunch of the donuts and sees the trail of donuts going inside the bear trap, goes inside there, steps on the treadle, the door slams behind them. We check the bear traps every day, sometimes more than one time a day. Sometimes they're on cameras that will send a signal, cell signal to the game warden, letting them know that the trap's been set off. If all we're doing is research, the officer will come, use a flashlight, look in those tiny little holes above the word danger there on each side of the word danger in that trap with a flashlight to see if the bear already has ear tags. If it already has ear tags, going to try to read the ear tag and then just open up the trap and let the bear go. If it has no ear tags and we're doing this for research, we're going to dart the bear. And I believe that might be the next picture here. Yep. So you can see this officer's got what's called a jab stick. It's a long telescoping pole. It's got a syringe on the end with a needle, and it's got some drug on it that will put the bear, relax all the bear's muscles. And what the other officer is doing on the other side is using a flashlight so that this officer can kind of see a little bit, because you're talking about a very dark inside of this trap and a black bear. It's pretty hard to see what you're doing, and you're looking for a large muscle mass. You're looking for the rear end. You have to do it quickly because the minute you jab that bear, it's going to swing around, and if it catches that aluminum telescoping pole, it'll fold it like a pretzel. So after that is done, the bear is then, once the bear is not moving anymore, not lifting up its head anymore, we open up the door, we pull the bear out and set it on the ground, sometimes on a blanket. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to put some eye drops in its eye to keep them moist, because this is a muscle relaxant, which means no muscle works, so they can't blink. And if you were to keep your eyes open the entire time I'm doing this presentation, you would start tearing and it would be uncomfortable. Same thing for the bear. So we put the eye drops on them, and then the purple and pink little towel is actually just a kind of like a loop of material, and we will slide that over the bear's head and cover the eyes. And as long as that bear isn't looking at you, you can literally watch its heart rate and its breathing rate go down. So now you can see in the picture how it's covered up the eyes, but the nose is open so he can breathe fine. But if you don't do that, if you don't cover up its eyes, it can see everything that's going on. It just can't do anything about it. So we're trying to cut down on the stress for the bear. What the officer is doing now is he is putting a chest girth tape around the bear to get an estimate of weight. We don't have scales out in the middle of the woods. We're not going to try to hoist the bear up on a tree. That would just be increased stress. We're just looking at an estimate. So once you get the estimate of the chest girth, you can look at a chart and it'll say if it's, let's say, for example, 36 inches around, it might weigh 180 pounds. And that's totally a guess, but that's the kind of thing and you can buy those tapes for livestock, goats, cattle, all kinds of stuff if you don't have a scale. So that's the one thing that we're doing. Then we're going to put ear tags in them. We're going to put one in each ear. So sometimes people will say, I saw a bear, it only had one ear tag in. Does that mean it was only a problem one time? Absolutely not. It doesn't mean it's a problem at all. It just means that that one tag probably got ripped out of its ear. Because every time we tag a bear, we put a tag in each ear. So it'll say PA Game Commission, and then it'll have a successive number on it. So the one on the right there says 2587. The one on the left would probably be 2586. And we will also sometimes, and I don't think this next slide shows it. Okay, so this is putting the ear tags in. Pretty similar to getting earrings put in. And we will also take a look at the teeth. And what we're looking at is these large canines. And then we're going to be looking at a tooth that we might pull, like one of these teeth right here. I don't know if you can see that on my pointer. Hopefully you can. But right behind the canine, there's a tiny little tooth that we call milk tooth. They've got two on the top on each side and one on the bottom. And we're going to pull one of those teeth out for aging. Sometimes we also lip tattoo them, and it would be on the underside of the lip. So we humans get tattoos with a tattoo needle. Bears get tattoos with a tattoo pliers. And the pliers has removable needles that are either in numbers or letters. And you can put like 1, 2, 3, 4, A, if that's what you wanted to put in there. You rub some ink on the inside of the lip, and then you literally squeeze the pliers, the needles, into the lip. The ink goes in there, and they are permanently tattooed. We don't do that for all bears, but some of our officers do it on some of the bears. So we are going to pull that tooth. And when you pull that tooth, what's going to happen is the officer is going to put that tooth with all the information about the bear tags and where it was caught, and it's going to put it in an envelope, and they're going to send that to a laboratory. The laboratory is going to take the root of that tooth, put it in a solution that softens it to the point where they can use a machine and cut a thin slice out of that tooth crossways. They lay that slice on a microscope slide. They stain it, in this case, purple. And then they can count the cementum annuli rings from the tooth, and this one happens to be from an 8-year-old bear. Very similar to you would count the rings of a tree, like a tree cookie, something you would slice apart there. So this is the little envelope that's going to get filled out with all the information. This happened to be on May 12th, 2011. It's got the 2 ear tag numbers on there, and I guessed that one right. It's 86. He estimated at 239 pounds, Berks County, Albany Township. Jamie, this was right up at Hawk Mountain, by the way. And this is the officer's district number on here. So that particular bear was tagged right up near Hawk Mountain. Then we're going to check on that bear, and we're either going to give it an antagonistic drug, which will bring it back out, or we're going to drag the bear into the shade. If it's super hot and we're in an area that has access to water, we may take a hose, if it's near a house, hose the bear down just to cool it down, but getting it in the shade is a good idea. And trying to let it come back on its own is better than giving it more drug. So it just depends on the situation. When they come back out of the drug, their head gets active first. First they start twitching their mouth and their eyes and their ears. Then their front legs come back to normal first, and the last thing that comes back to normal is their back legs. So sometimes they're walking away kind of like somebody that's had too much to drink, and they look kind of wobbly, but literally in a few minutes, 15 minutes of them getting up, excuse me, and walking away, they're going to be fine. And you would think this is a super high stress situation for the bears, but we have done this before where the next day that exact same bear would be caught back in the trap again. So I don't know that it was so stressful that they wouldn't come back in again. Sometimes they get really smart. If the bear is super long, super big, they will keep their hind legs out of that trap and reach in as far as they can, grab the bait bucket. The door closes, but it only closes on their butt, and then they just get right back out of it again. So they get to be pretty smart. There's just a picture of him kind of starting to get his back legs as he's walking away. And there he is just maybe 30 yards later, and he's walking normal again. So that was kind of quick. Before I show the bear hide and skull, Jamie, is there any questions that, anything like that I should try to answer?
We do have one question, and I just want to say years ago before I worked at Hawk Mountain and I did one of your bear educator workshops at Hawk Mountain, it was phenomenal. And one of my coworkers that was there with me said it was the best day of her life. And I had asked a question. I said, how do you trap a bear? And you said, donuts. I thought you were joking. And then when I went to the site, and there was like the biggest amount of donuts I had ever seen, I was like, he must be joking.
Yeah.
Okay, so we did have a question. So you had mentioned the population of bears in Pennsylvania is about 20,000 maximum. How is it sustainable to hunt 3,000 to 4,000 a year? What is their reproduction rate and lifespan?
Oh, that's good. So their lifespan, they're compared to other animals, they live a pretty long life. I think I'm guessing now that I'm hoping this is correct. I think the oldest sow that we have recorded, because it was tagged, much younger in its life, was about 26 years, which is really old for a wild animal to live in the wild. So, we have bears that I don't have the harvest figures memorized, but they're all on our website. By the way, I should mention that it's pgc.pa.gov, and lots of information about bears. You can check out all the harvest figures, but of all the species that we have in Pennsylvania, about a little over 480, bears are the ones that we probably study the most. And we know that 3,000 to 4,000 is a sustainable figure that'll bring it probably back up by next season up to another about 19,000 to 20,000 bears. We also know that if we weren't going to harvest them, we would have a lot more human-bear conflicts. So here's the deal. Humans like to live where bears live. That's just the way it is. I mean, that's where it is. And so when you start building developments and single homes in the middle of the woods that's already good bear habitat, if you don't learn how to live with them, you're going to probably have conflicts with them. But when I say that, one of the most important things that we can educate the public about bears is to not feed them. It is unlawful. It is illegal to feed bears. So if you have a bird feeder out and bears are hitting your bird feeder, you are now feeding bears. That is unlawful, okay? And yes, you'll say, yeah, but I know I'm only feeding birds and bears are coming. Well, so are squirrels and raccoons and probably everything else. But most people are feeding animals because they like to see them. Most people like bears. They do. Whether you hunt them or not, people like them. We do too. And we don't want to see that bear become a problem that we end up having to, people are like, oh, we'll just trap it and take it somewhere else. That's not the solution. If you've addicted the bear to humans from your neighborhood, Jamie, and we trap him and drop him off in my neighborhood, do you not think he's going to become a problem in my neighborhood? So where do you take bears where there isn't already bears? It's pretty difficult. So it's better to try to educate people and say, look, let's say bears are coming to your bird feeder. I have a solution for you. It's going to take a few days. So if you want to feed during the day, that's fine. But put a tray or something underneath your bird feeder to catch all of the feed that birds are pretty wasteful. They hop up on the bird feeder, they scratch around, they're looking for that perfect seed, and everything else is on the ground. Other birds will just feed on the ground. They prefer that, but bears will too. And so as long as the feed's on the ground, the bear's going to keep coming back. But if you can eliminate that as the best that you can, or stop feeding for a week, let's say, the bear will move on to another food source. They will. They're not going to keep coming back to a spot where there's nothing to eat. But so if you really do like bears, you want to try to do the best thing for them. First off, no bear in Pennsylvania needs human food to survive. None. They don't. We feed them because they're fun to watch. Okay? But we don't want the bear to become addicted and not afraid of people because, sometimes a fed bear is a dead bear. If we have to move him and he becomes a problem again, then maybe we have to put him down. And that's a nice way of saying killing him. And that's simply because he's been addicted to human actions. And there's nothing they won't eat. They are an omnivore. They love everything that we love. Plus they love our garbage. So if they're hitting your garbage, try and do the best you can about putting the garbage out only the day that garbage is coming. Anything you can do to remove the food source will help. So
Thank you, Dan. That was great you touched on that because we did have some questions, particularly about
Okay.
the bird seed coming in.
And you know, I did see a question come up. I can answer it. Something to do with skunk cabbage. Yeah. And yes, when a bear comes out of hibernation or dormancy, there's not a lot of green plants that are out there. One of the first plants that come out, you know, probably in beginning of March, is skunk cabbage. And if you are in an area where there are bears and you walk through like a wetland, someplace where you're going to see a lot of skunk cabbage, you will literally see them chomped off, and you're thinking, what in the world would have grazed on these things? So when a bear is in this dormancy, we'll call her hibernation, even though it's not a true hibernator, they get this plug thing that's in their system that to keep them from needing to go to the bathroom. The minute they start eating skunk cabbage, well, that starts to clean the whole thing out, and the whole process starts over. I was trying to be as nice as possible there. So yes, they will eat skunk cabbage because it's the first available plant that's out there, and you know, you step on it and it smells terrible, they eat it. They don't really care. So that was a good question, and that is true.
All right, thank you, Dan. Do you want me to keep going with some questions? There are a few more.
Sure.
Okay, we have a question about territory size. How far do bears roam? And also, how good is a bear's sense of smell? Okay,
start with the smell part. So they have different characteristics that when you look at a bear's head, a bear has pretty decent sized ears, has a really big nose, and tiny eyes. So their sense of smell and hearing is excellent. It's what keeps them being able to find food and not to become food. Okay, their sense of their eyesight is not as good because you know, if you look at a mouse's head, a mouse has giant eyes, giant ears, and a pretty big nose. He's a tiny little critter, and everything wants to eat him. So it's not that their eyesight isn't good, but as far as the different features, they're tiny on the bear's head compared to like a bobcat. Bobcat's got a giant set of eyes for such a small skull. So I would venture to say that their hearing and smell overall is better than their eyesight. Okay, and their hearing and their smell lets them know that what they think they see is exactly what they see. They smell a human, they know it's a human because they got great sense of smell. So they have a really good sense of smell. What was the other part? Oh, the territories. So a boar, a male bear, is going to have a much bigger territory. Specifically, again, I don't have it all memorized, but it's probably going to be 3 or 4 times the size of a sow. A sow has cubs with her. She isn't able to roam a really big territory when they're young because of taking the chances of moving into an area where there's a boar that might try to kill them. And he will. When they're young, he's going after them to kill them. And it's not Walt Disney. They're not all hanging out with each other. That's his chance to get her in heat and breed with her. So it's not that they both know their territory is really good, but the sow's going to have a much smaller territory when she has cubs, especially. What was the other? Was there another part of that question?
I think that was
okay.
Covered that question. So thank you.
One other thing, since like I'm not the bear biologist, okay, but on our website we have wildlife notes and of all the species, and the better details would be on that specific one. I didn't memorize all of them, but to give you the square miles, but they're there. They're on our website.
Got you. Thank you so much. And yeah, absolutely. Your website has many free educational resources that are wonderful.
Sure.
So thank you. So there's one more question that I think I'll ask now on behalf of
okay.
And the other ones maybe we'll wait till after you do your show and
tell. Okay.
So this is about when you're talking about when you're processing the bear and it's has the muscle relaxer that you extract a tooth and that can help age it. So there was a question about is there any pain medication given to kind of compensate for extraction?
Sure. So I'll show the skull now. Okay. So this is a bear's skull. And these little teeth right here are the ones that we're going to take out. So the tool that we use kind of looks like a flattened screwdriver with a bevel on it. Now, again, the bear is awake. It's kind of you asked what are some interesting things. Putting your hand inside a bear's mouth while it's alive and breathing on you is kind of interesting. So I've done that with live ones, and then ones that hunters have harvested. It's not such a big deal because he's not breathing on you anymore. But it is kind of interesting. And is there pain involved? I'm sure that there is. The bear doesn't wince. He doesn't do anything. It's a muscle relaxant. He can't do any of that. So a lot of our officers, our wardens, have a little tube of like Ambisol in their little kit, and they just squirt some in there. There's very little blood at all, but we're pulling a tooth for data. And we've probably been doing it for 25 plus years. So we have a lot of information on them. So, I mean, we get teeth pulled. We go to the doctor, get shots all the time. We're basically just taking one tiny little tooth that bear does not need to nip things, to grab hold of things and kill, or to grind. They are tiny little teeth. You can kind of see them right here. And there's usually 2 on the top, sometimes 3. And then 2 on the bottom, 2 to 3 on the top on each side, and 2 on the bottom on each side. And so, yeah, is there a little bit of pain? Probably. We do, try to make it as quick as possible, but I'm not going to lie to you, I would imagine so. But the bear doesn't move, And just a little tip, when we're doing this, we're all wearing the same kind of uniform, so the bear can't figure out who's who. I usually cover up my name. Just saying.
I heard
yeah, just saying. Yeah. So I'll keep going on that and talk a little bit more about the skull here. So I'll kind of back up here a little bit so you can kind of see this stuff. You still hear me okay, Jeremy?
Sounds perfect.
Okay. So this is a black bear skull, and this is not a super big one. I mean, you can see it's pretty decent size, but we have huge bears in Pennsylvania. And I have measured bear skulls in Pennsylvania that are probably, another 3-4 inches in the back and another 2-3 inches wide, but it is a huge animal, and it is an omnivore. We have the same teeth that the bear does. We have incisors in the front, we have canines, just not quite as big as those, and then we have molars, and the front ones are called premolars, and the rest are just molars. And the bear's an omnivore like we are. As humans, we can choose to just eat plants, which would be a vegetarian. An animal would be a herbivore. Or we could choose to just eat meat. We'd be a carnivore. But this guy is a true omnivore. He's got teeth for all 3 things, or all 3 kinds of teeth. But he will eat probably 70 to 80% of his diet is plant. So that's a little bit about the bear skull. And probably the weirdest thing I've ever seen when I was working on bear skulls is if you look at the bottom of this, I actually had one time that had a complete second set of 2 canines and incisors on the side. So it had this normal one and another complete set grown right on the side. That was very odd. I still have that skull. Talk a little bit about bear's hide. So this is a pretty decent sized hide. Kind of see back here. If I put it down with its hind feet on the ground, I'm about 5'11". So this bear is bigger than I am. This bear also is kind of interesting to Hawk Mountain in that he was probably darn close to Hawk Mountain. He was killed actually on the road between Weiser State Forest and Game Lands 110 going through Port Clinton. So again, this was a Berks County bear up in the area of Hawk Mountain. Hawk Mountain area has a ton of bears, which I always think is interesting because there's a ton of people who spend time up at Hawk Mountain. They have literally no idea, many of them have literally no idea how many bears are up there. And they sometimes, in my opinion, like if you're going hiking up there or you're camping, if you're a thru hiker on the Appalachian Trail, never keep your food inside your tent. Like the craziest thing I had happen one time, it was an illegal camper. It was just somebody who decided they were going camping. They weren't a thru hiker. They weren't on the Appalachian Trail. They were just camping in the woods. We were driving up the road checking for that very thing, and we could smell bacon cooking. It was in the morning. And I said, now we're in the vehicle and we can smell bacon cooking. That's how it was spreading through the woods. And I said to my partner, I'm like, you do smell that, right? Like I am super hungry now. So here is a tent in the middle of the road, of the dirt road. And there is smoke coming out of the tent, in the tent. In front of the zippered door, they had a sterno, and they were cooking bacon inside their tent. Their tent was completely filled with the smell of bacon, which is like a giant bait tent. And, so in addition to giving them a ticket for camping there, we explained to them how dangerous that really could have been. And he's like, but we're in a tent. And I'm like, yeah, the bear's coming through the tent. And I would have sold that tent because forevermore it's going to smell like bacon. It would be a bad idea. But anyhow, so this particular bear, it's kind of cool. We've got, so I have a couple of tags on the bear's ear. This is a similar one that, that we put on, you can see in the picture. We would put that silver one on each side. If the bear is harvested lawfully, then we would end up putting after they come to a check station, we'll put a plastic one-way locking tag on it. So those are just some of the things, this particular guy has got all of his claws and stuff on there. They're really big claws, but they're not sharp. And so they're similar to a canine, to your dog, especially a dog that's outside. A dog in the house doesn't really wear his claws down. They get kind of sharp. You have to trim them all the time. But a bear walking around or a dog that's outside all the time, they kind of wear them down, and they use them for everything. So they are very powerful, and they're very long. I mean, they're 2 inches or so, but they're not super sharp because they wear them. They're walking on them at all times. 3 other things that I have. I do have a replitrack this is a replitrack of a pretty decent sized bear. This is most likely a replitrack of a front paw. The front paws are larger than the hind paws on a bear. So, I mean, if you are out there, many times you'll see in the mud or the snow something similar, but not the perfect track. And so it might be cut off, it might be just a couple of toes. They do walk plantigrade. They're flat, just like we walk flat or plantigrade. But they don't always show the perfect print, in the mud or whatever substrate that they're in. And if you ask if a bear does do this in the woods, yes, they do. It's usually rather large like this, and little tip on that as to what it is. They're usually blunt on each end, where a canine is pointy on each end. The bear doo-doo is not normally. And of course, just like in that picture, it's indicative of what the bear was eating as to what you're going to find in the scat. And the last thing that I have to show you is a bear collar. So this is an old one that was used. It would have a battery inside here, and a biologist would use a telemetry device, an antenna, to try and locate and normally we're doing this on sows because we want to follow them into a den to maybe do some sort of research on their cubs or whatever. So that's kind of the information, Jamie, that I have on bears, and I don't know if there's any more questions, but
there are more questions. That was so fascinating. Okay. Thank you.
Cool.
You had just mentioned dogs, and we do have a question about dogs.
Mm-hmm.
How do bears respond to dogs? Am I safer hiking with a dog or without?
I'd go without. So I'll give you an idea. In Pennsylvania, you can't hunt bears with dogs, but in other states you can. And in those states that you can, they don't use one dog. They use multiple dogs. So one dog is not really a deterrent to a bear. As a matter of fact, putting a little yappy dog inside your tent is like cooking bacon inside your tent, maybe. So it might be more of an attractant to the bear. And, you don't want to make your dog into a hot wing, if you know what I mean. So, I think the most important thing is that the bear knows that you're there. So the good part about having a dog with you, especially if he's barking and making noise, is that the bear's going to avoid you for the most part because it smells you or hears you, and you'll probably never see it. It's when you walk through a real thick growth and all of a sudden you surprise a bear. If that bear is surprised, especially if it's a sow with cubs, she doesn't know what you are. She doesn't realize that you're not a threat. And then all of a sudden your dog starts barking at it. Could be a bad situation. It could be. But a lot of people hike with their dogs and they never have any trouble. I don't want you to think, your viewers to think that bears are going to eat you because you're in the woods. That's not the case. You simply just need to be bear aware. And again, if you're going to go hiking, especially by yourself, I would put bells or something on your backpack, something that makes some noise. I mean, so you're not sneaking up on anything. But I'm not saying don't hike with your dog. Certainly don't let your dog go after to try to chase the bear. That's probably a bad idea. But
thank you. And
sure.
You mentioned the bear bells, because that was actually a question I had, is if you recommend it. What about
Sure.
a bear spray? Is that something?
Yeah, so bear spray is a great idea. But knowing how to use your bear spray and actually having it somewhere on your belt so that you can quickly access it is more important. If you have bear spray and it's in your backpack, you may as well be bringing something else with you because it's not going to work. You're not going to have time. This bear can close the distance within seconds of you. And so what I would suggest is if people want to carry bear spray that it is actual bear spray, not a little tiny can of mace. It's not going to work. It needs to be bear spray, and that you go online and look and see how to do it. Many times when you spray at a bear, I mean, I've never done that, but I've hiked out west, and usually they have good videos on what you should do and how you, and I've used inert spray already. Like I did a workshop and they had bear awareness, and they had bear sprays that did not have the pepper in them, just the aerosol in it, so that you could practice doing it. Because really, when you need it is not really the best time to practice with it. You know what I mean? And they're not good for very long. It's a few second burst, and that's pretty much it. So literally, if you're right-handed and you're carrying a backpack on your belt on the right-hand side, something that you can access quickly. But bear spray is a great idea.
Thank you, Dan. And there was just a little kind of question that popped up. Someone thought they had heard that bear spray was illegal, so that's just false?
That's false. Yep. No, it's a great idea. Yep.
And in fact, out west, it's sold at every gas station.
Yep. Yeah. The only problem I've ever had out west is after you spent $30 for it, you're not allowed to bring it on the airplane back. So we always end up giving some lucky person who's getting off their plane our $30 can of bear spray. And no one's ever given it to me when I've got off the plane, but it is a good idea there's nothing wrong with having bear spray. It's not illegal. It's not illegal.
Thank you. So we do have one more question. The last question at this point is, do Pennsylvania bears ever suffer from pandemics? Or localized
I did not have it in this particular slideshow, but one of the problems that we have in bears in certain geographic areas in Pennsylvania is mange. So bears do get mange. It's really sad looking to see a bear that has, an overabundance of mange. If we happen to catch that particular bear in a trap, and the warden has the drug, which is called ivermectin. It's used, people that raise sheep and goats and things like that will use it to cure worms, like from livestock. Well, ivermectin does sometimes work on bears for mange. And sometimes our wardens are able to give it a shot, and it will help it. But here's another reason to not feed bears. Let's say you have several healthy bears coming to your feeders, which you shouldn't, but let's say you do. And then a bear with mange shows up, and they're hanging out together, nose-to-nose contact, all that kind of good stuff. That sick bear can quickly spread it to perfectly healthy bears. So another, sometimes people call a bear with full-on mange has almost no hair, and it looks like an alien walking around. It's very sad. But mange, they also can get rabies and things like that, but mange is prevalent in some parts of Pennsylvania. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Sure.
And that was the last of the questions.
Okay, cool.
What an amazing presentation. Thank you. There was some comments that came in saying, great job.
Okay, cool.
So fascinating. And bears just capture the interest and imagination. And another thank you coming in right now.
There you go. Cool.
Thank you again.
Sure.
You're amazing. And we're not done with Dan Lynch. No.
One more. At least one more, yeah.
Webinar it's in August, correct?
Yes.
And on animal sign and tracking.
Right.
More encore presentation with Dan. So thank you, Dan. Thank you to our wonderful viewers for joining us. We greatly appreciate it. Come visit us at Hawk Mountain. Our trails are open. Check out our website for modifications we have to be safe during the times of coronavirus. And as always, we have many more virtual programs coming your way soon. And here's what's coming up next. This Friday, July 17th, we have the Bats of Hawk Mountain with Dr. Aaron Haynes from Millersville. And he has been doing a lot of bat research at Hawk Mountain, and he's going to share with us what he found. And that's at 4 o'clock. Next Wednesday, July 22nd, we have the Forest of Hawk Mountain with Steven Ziegler, and that's at 1 o'clock p.m. and Steve is with DCNR. On Thursday, July 23rd, we have Sanctuary Storytime, Friendship at the Feeding Station at 11 o'clock a.m. And that story was actually written by a former Hawk Mountain trainee. who hopefully will be joining us. And then also on Thursday, July 23rd, we have The Wind and the Water, migrating along the East Asian Oceanic Flyway with Camille Concepcion at 4:00 p.m. And Camille is also a former Hawk Mountain Conservation Science trainee. So lots of good things coming up. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and thank you for spending time with us. We hope to see you again soon. Bye for now.